Tracy is being attacked by a man. I shouted this loudly in front of the relatives who had gathered together. Naturally, the relatives looked at each other and started to murmur about what was happening. What do you mean she's being attacked? Tracy's mother, looking worried, rushed over to me. Please, just come here. You'll understand once you see. While pretending to be panicked, I led the relatives to the front of the green room. Then, from inside the green room, we could hear the sound of a man and a woman breathing, and all the relatives were shocked. What does this mean? Tracy's father raised his voice in confusion. I, too, did not want to believe that this was happening. Actually, at this point, I finally decided to reveal the truth about Brian and Tracy to everyone. Everyone's faces froze upon hearing my words. Clenching my fists tightly, I inserted the key into the lock of the green room door. My name is Gina Holmes. I am 56 years old and work in a real estate company. I married my husband Brian 30 years ago, and we were blessed with our son Aaron 2 years later. Aaron is 28 years old this year. Recently, Aaron introduced Tracy, a woman who is his classmate, as his fiancée to Brian and me. Tracy is as beautiful as a female news anchor, with a face that would appeal to any man. She is a well-mannered young lady, and I thought she was a perfect match as Aaron's wife. Brian seemed to feel the same way, quickly getting along with Tracy and enjoying a lively conversation. Aaron and I have been together since our college days. Leaning towards Aaron as she spoke, Tracy seemed very happy, and their bond appeared very deep. If my beloved son Aaron were to marry a girl like Tracy, I could not be happier. That's what I thought. Brian must have felt the same way. Watching the two of them so close, he was smiling the entire time. Brian and I had an arranged marriage, but I felt as though I had been in love with Brian just like Aaron and Tracy were. Now, as a family, our love has turned into deep affection, but Brian remains a precious part of my life. Watching Aaron and Tracy together, I reaffirmed my feelings for Brian. However, I did not yet know the fate that awaited me. Our family, which should have been enveloped in happiness with Aaron's marriage, was slowly beginning to fall apart. The first time I felt something was off was during New Year's of the following year. Aaron and Tracy had officially registered their marriage and returned to our home as a married couple for the first time. Thank you for coming all this way. No. I was looking forward to seeing you and Father. Despite the inconvenience of visiting her in-laws, Tracy did not show any displeasure and smiled. Feel free to make yourself at home here. Brian seemed to like Tracy's attitude and carefully showed her around the room and explained how to use the household appliances. Dad seems happy. Yes, he is. We only have one son, so he's probably happy thinking of her as the daughter we never had. I too was happy to have a daughter like Tracy, as I had never raised a girl. Brian already seemed to feel like Tracy was his own daughter, and he was more excited than usual. That night, as we all sat around the dining table, a drunk Brian said, "Tracy, why don't you just live with us from now on?" Brian, his nose and ears reddened, gazed passionately at Tracy. I thought it was too much to suggest they live with us in front of everyone, and I looked to Tracy for her reaction. It would be hard to refuse if one's in-laws suggested living together in front of everyone. Come on, you're too drunk. I threw in a lifeline from the side. It's fine, isn't it? Right, Tracy? I nervously looked at Tracy's face. I thought she would be uncomfortable, but she smiled as if she didn't mind at all. Yes, I'd really like that. See? Aaron, this way you'll save on rent too, and it's a win-win situation if she's willing to come. Tracy easily agreed to live with us, which seemed to make Brian even happier. Tracy probably just nodded out of politeness to Brian's suggestion. Brian, taking it seriously, must feel very fortunate. Enough already, you're embarrassing us. I'm sorry, Tracy. Forget about what he just said. No, I don't mind at all. In fact, I'd really like to live together. I was surprised. Probably her words were not her true feelings, but a consideration for Brian's feelings, yet she managed to smoothly deflect the unreasonable suggestion without any signs of disturbance, which felt like a capable woman's response. Afterwards, the four of us continued to enjoy a pleasant meal. Brian doted on Tracy more than on Erin, and the two of them chatted happily while drinking together. "It's good that you get along with Dad." "Yeah, I think so. But I think Dad is a bit too drunk." As we watched the two of them, Erin and I felt a heartwarming sense of joy. Brian actually started talking about living with the young couple after the holiday break, a week after New Year's had passed. "Just like I said before, Tracy and Erin will start living with us next month. I've asked for the bed to be prepared." "What? What do you mean?" I was surprised and looked at Brian again. "I mean, living together. Didn't we talk about this at length last time? Did you forget because you were drunk?" "I remember, but were you serious about that?" "Of course." Brian nodded as if it was the most natural thing in the world. I had thought that the talk of living together was just a joke meant for that moment, so I couldn't hide my surprise at Brian's words. "Did you really discuss this with Erin? And did Tracy truly agree to live together?" Brian sighed, seeming exasperated by my barrage of questions. "Of course, I've been in touch. It was Tracy who said she really wanted to live with us." "Really? It's unusual for someone to voluntarily suggest living with their in-laws. Tracy's parents live in another state, so it's true that our house is closer, but it's still strange that she would actually want to live together." I was against the idea of living together. It's not that I didn't want to live with Tracy. Having seen friends troubled by living with in-laws, I had decided that even if Erin were to get married, we should definitely avoid living together. Despite my views, Brian insisted on going ahead because Tracy wants it. And so, the discussion about living together quickly progressed, and eventually, Tracy and Erin moved in the next month. "Please take care of me, Mother and Father." Tracy greeted politely, and both Brian and I welcomed her. Especially Brian, who was truly delighted, and I watched him gleefully with Erin, like a child. Living with Tracy and Erin turned out to be less problematic than I thought. Rather than being without problems, it was almost scary how well Tracy got along with Brian. Tracy seemed to like our home and was lively and happy every day, even though she was a housewife. Most of the household chores were done by Tracy, which allowed me to relax. The days were very lively and enjoyable, but at some point, Brian started complaining of feeling unwell and began taking days off from work frequently. "Are you okay? You've been looking unwell lately." "I don't think it's a serious illness, but it's tough to go to work." "Sorry, but I'll take another day off today." "Okay. Make sure to go to the hospital if it gets worse." "I know." Seeing my concern, Brian snuggled deeper into his blanket. "Please leave Father's care to me. If anything happens, I'll take him to the hospital immediately. It's good that I'm a housewife." Hearing Tracy say this, I felt somewhat relieved. Indeed, having Tracy live with us allowed me to leave Brian in her care with peace of mind. I left for work feeling a bit relieved. When I returned home after work, Brian looked better than in the morning and seemed to be in good spirits. "How are you feeling?" "Ah. I'm much better thanks to Tracy's nursing." Brian's face, oddly enough, seemed pleased as he said this. Father was sweating a lot, so I helped him change his clothes. I also wiped down his body and made sure he was clean. "Did you do all that?" "Yes. He's an important family member, after all." I thought that nursing Brian would at most involve checking on him or maybe making some soup. But Tracy had even helped him change his clothes and wiped down his body. "Thank you, Tracy. As you can see, I'm completely recovered." "I'm glad." Tracy's voice seemed unusually cheerful. I noticed that Brian seemed particularly happy. While I was curious about their overly good relationship, I thought it was good that they were getting along well and decided not to say anything at that time. However, Brian started to frequently take sick days, and each time, Tracy would take care of him. Whenever I came home from work, I couldn't help but feel that the atmosphere between the two of them crossed the line of father-in-law and daughter-in-law. I began to suspect that Brian's supposed illness might be a lie. Could those two be? I didn't want to think about it, but once I started to suspect something, my nature wouldn't allow me to rest until I uncovered the truth. One day, knowing that Aaron would be away on a business trip, I lied that I would also be away on the same day. "Tracy, I'm sorry to ask, but I'm leaving the house in your care." "Yes, please leave it to me." With an enthusiastic Tracy behind me, I left the house as planned for the weekend. I spent time shopping in the downtown area and dining at a restaurant I had been curious about, just killing time. Eventually, I entered an internet cafe and waited as time slowly passed. It seemed to last forever. When it was around 10 p.m., I quietly left the internet cafe room. I went straight home. Brian and Tracy thought that neither Aaron nor I would be returning today. They were probably thoroughly enjoying their time together. With my heart pounding, I quietly opened the front door and entered the house. The lights were on in the living room, but they were not there. Expecting to find them in Brian's room, indeed, I heard their voices coming from there. I pulled out my smartphone from my pocket and turned on the voice recorder. It's so easy to pretend to be living together like this. It seems no one suspects the fake illness, not even Aaron or Mom. Really, should you be saying that? Ha, you were thinking the same thing, weren't you? Did you catch me? Really, those people are so naive. Why would I live with my in-laws without any benefit to myself? If it means I can be with you, then playing along with this act is a small price to pay. Tracy. Their tone, as if locked in a passionate embrace, made me feel my face flush with heat. Brian and Tracy had been having an affair, hidden from Aaron and me. When Brian first suggested that he wanted to live with Tracy, they had already connected with each other. I wonder when they started this relationship. Right after Aaron introduced you, my instincts told me you were the one I wanted. It turns out I was right. Our physical compatibility is just amazing. Oh, stop it, you're embarrassing me. Imagining Tracy giggling with a sweet voice made me feel nauseous. I couldn't believe her nerve, cheating with Brian, a man nearly her parents' age. What about that plan we discussed? Will it go smoothly? Ah, about Aaron? Don't worry, leave it to me. I've got the car ready. And I'll get rid of Mom too. That's great. You really are a reliable man, Brian. I really, really like you. Tracy. I feel the same. Their discussion of some plan worried me. It seemed related to Aaron, but they didn't share the details, and I couldn't understand any of the crucial information. He mentioned getting a car ready, but what for? However, his words about driving me out of the house were something I couldn't ignore. Hearing them whisper sweet nothings to each other was utterly repulsive. Thinking it could serve as evidence of their affair, I decided to record a little more when suddenly. Hey, do you feel that? A presence? Ah, maybe. Had they sensed my presence? I felt them approaching the door of the room. Thinking quickly, I rushed away from the room, slipped on my shoes, and left through the front door. If they discovered I was back, they might delete the recording. Just in time, I managed to escape and decided to spend the night at a hotel. After all, it's unbelievable they'd consider driving me out of our home while engaging in an affair. I'll make them regret this. Clutching my smartphone, I fell asleep in the hotel bed, determined. I resolved to disclose Brian and Tracy's affair to Aaron. I didn't want to hurt Aaron, who was innocent, but I couldn't keep the affair a secret now that I knew. I waited for Aaron to return from his business trip, but even after the week began, he didn't come home. Aaron was in a traffic accident. What? I was shocked by the call from the hospital. Aaron had been hit by a car on his way back from his business trip. Furthermore, the driver had fled the scene after hitting him. I was devastated as I took the call, but when I hurried to the hospital, Aaron had already passed away. How could this happen? Staggered by the sudden news of my only son's death, I nearly collapsed. All I knew about the hit-and-run was that the driver was a man. The perpetrator was still free, showing no signs of remorse. The words Brian had spoken with Tracy echoed in my mind. They had been discussing Aaron. "I've prepared the car," Brian had said, and Tracy had praised his dependability. There was no doubt in my mind. Brian was the driver in the hit-and-run. It was part of their plot. I felt a deep, burning anger well up inside me. I would never forgive them. They thought they could get away with taking my son's life. Aaron's funeral was arranged quickly. The sudden loss of young and handsome Aaron was visibly mourned by all relatives present. Among the gathered relatives were Tracy's parents, who likely had no idea that their daughter was having an affair with her father-in-law and had conspired to kill Aaron. I was calmly waiting for the right moment to expose Brian and Tracy. About an hour before the funeral started, as everyone was quietly reminiscing about Aaron and sitting in the chapel, I remembered I had left my wallet in the control room. Since I needed to keep my valuables with me, I decided to retrieve my wallet. I had the key to the control room, so I quickly turned the lock and quietly opened the door. As I entered, I was startled by the voices of a man and woman coming from behind a partition. "Tracy. Brian, we shouldn't hear. It's fine." I locked the door. "Everyone's at the chapel. They think Aaron died in a tragic accident. Little do they know I did it. Oh, Brian. But thanks to that, I can be with you. I love you." Their incredulous words echoed in my ears with their sweet breaths. Brian, unaware that I had the key, was inappropriately intimate with Tracy in such a setting. They were the undeniable cause of Aaron's death, behaving disgracefully at the time of his passing. Overwhelmed by the worst of situations, I approached the partition and, hiding, allowed only my smartphone's camera to peek out and began filming. The screen showed Brian and Tracy embracing naked, oblivious to my presence as they were absorbed in each other. I continued filming. "Ah, Tracy, I love you. Let's divorce Gina as soon as the funeral is over and get married. Yes, I want to be with you, Brian." As they made selfish plans in their shameless voices, I filmed them, filled with rage. Once I had enough footage, I left the room and quietly locked the control room door. I headed straight to the chapel and raised my voice in front of the gathered relatives. "Tracy is being attacked by a man." I shouted this loudly in front of all the assembled relatives. Naturally, the relatives looked at each other and began to murmur about what was happening. "What do you mean she's being attacked?" Tracy's mother, with a worried expression, rushed over to me. "Please, just come here. You'll understand once you see." While pretending to be frantic, I led the relatives to the front of the control room. Then, the sound of a man and a woman breathing heavily could be heard from inside, shocking everyone present. "What does this mean?" Tracy's father exclaimed in a disheveled voice. I didn't want to believe this was happening either. Actually, at this point, I finally decided to reveal the truth about Brian and Tracy to everyone. The faces of everyone who heard my words froze. I clenched my fists tightly and inserted the key into the lock of the control room door. With a bang, I swung the door open, and the voices inside suddenly stopped. "What?" Instead, the sound of a surprised Brian could be heard. And no wonder. Brian was, in fact, in the midst of being intimate with Tracy. They must have thought that they locked the door and that no one could enter. They had no idea that I had a key and were foolishly busy with their affair, confirming my worst suspicions. I entered the control room with the relatives and peered over to where Brian and Tracy were behind the partition. "What are you two doing in here?" The two were scrambling to get dressed, and when I peeked in, they were only half-dressed. The expressions on Brian and Tracy's faces paled as they were exposed in front of the relatives. "You two, what have you done?" Tracy's parents were probably the most shocked. Their daughter, a widow at her husband's funeral, was caught being intimate with her father-in-law, Brian. It's no wonder they found it unbelievable. "This isn't what it looks like." I was just resting because I felt ill. Brian was taking care of me, but then he started to assault me. Tracy desperately tried to defend herself and made Brian out to be the villain. Brian, taken aback, shouted back. What are you talking about? But it's true. Think about it, a wife mourning her husband wouldn't do this on her own. Tracy's clear declaration shocked Brian, who looked betrayed. I couldn't stand their charade any longer and intervened. I happened to see these two in love earlier. My sudden confession made Brian and Tracy glare at me. The relatives held their breath, waiting to see what would unfold next. What nonsense are you spouting? You're so dull and stupid. Ah, now that I think about it, Aaron was just as stupid. He must have gotten it from his mother. Brian harshly dismissed me and Aaron. I had never been directly attacked by Brian before, but now his true feelings were clear. Brian had lost interest in me from the moment he met Tracy, a woman young enough to be his daughter, and did not hesitate to cheat. Can you still say that after seeing this? I challenged Brian by showing a video I had captured earlier in the control room, which depicted their intimate encounter. The video clearly showed the two of them, absorbed in their desires, unaware that they were being secretly recorded. What is this? Why did you record this? Seeing the video, Brian and Tracy's faces turned pale with panic. The relatives witnessing this also turned pale with shock. Tracy, this is true, isn't it? Why would you do this? No, Mom, it's a mistake. I couldn't possibly love anyone other than Aaron. Despite Tracy's desperate excuses, doubt spread across her mother's face. As the video reached a crucial moment, everyone's face froze. It's fine. I locked the door. Everyone's at the chapel. They think Aaron died in a tragic accident. Little do they know I did it. Oh, Brian. But thanks to that, I can be with you. I love you. The video captured Brian's confession about the hit and run and evidence of their mutual affection. The faces around me were filled with disbelief. I was utterly shocked when I first heard their words earlier. I didn't want to believe that Aaron had lost his life because of these two. Did you kill Aaron? Tracy's father looked at Brian as if he were a monster. It's a setup. I didn't do such a thing. Brian's protest was a painfully weak excuse. If you think so, how about this? I then began to play a recording I had made just before Aaron's death, capturing a conversation between Brian and Tracy at home. The recording revealed the two of them whispering about their love for each other, not as partners but as lovers. It also clearly captured them planning to take Aaron's life. This recording was made the day before Aaron died, at our house. After hearing this, do you still think these two are innocent? Everyone shook their heads in response. It seemed the video and recording had a significant impact. What are you doing, you old hag? Because of you, everything about us and Aaron has been exposed. Hey Tracy. What kind of way is that to speak? Watching Tracy scream and reveal her true nature, I sighed in disbelief. Tracy. I thought you were a polite and wonderful young lady. But since you started living with us, I began to suspect something was off. Were you just pretending to be a decent, sensible girl? In your heart, were you laughing at me and Aaron as fools? That's... Tracy's face turned bitter, and she stuttered, apparently hit the mark. Then, as if seeking help, she looked at Brian. However, Brian, not wanting to increase his own guilt, glared at her and yelled. Yes, it's true. It all started because she flirted with me. Does a daughter-in-law behave in a way that misleads her father-in-law? No matter how many times I rejected her, she kept insisting, so I just pretended to reciprocate her feelings for a while. Tracy's face showed shock as she listened to Brian's claims. She hadn't expected him to shift the blame onto her. Gradually, her expression turned from surprise to anger. However, she had just betrayed Brian herself, so it was a case of tit for tat. Just wait, you're the worst. Weren't you the one who approached me first? You were the one who suggested we live together and actively tried to start this affair with me. What? As the two began to bicker, I felt a headache coming on. Was Aaron's life lost over such petty squabbles between these two despicable people? Truly, I felt terribly sorry for Aaron. I clenched my palms tightly. Listen, both of you, it doesn't matter who initiated or who is more to blame. What matters is that you both trampled on the dignity of me and Aaron, and you took Aaron's life. And yet, instead of apologizing to Aaron, you won't even admit your guilt. Don't mess around. Aaron's life wasn't a tool for you to use for your affairs and arguments. Apologize to Aaron right now. With a voice rising from the depths of my rage, I alternated my gaze between Brian and Tracy as I spoke. This anger was Aaron's grief. It was also the anger of everyone here, including me. Brian and Tracy's expressions froze, turning into looks of terror. Please forgive me. I just wanted to be with Tracy. Aaron was in the way, and I thought if he was gone, we could be happy. I'm sorry too. Though Brian and Tracy lowered their heads in apology, it was not so simple. The life of my son had been taken, an apology would not suffice. Your apologies here mean nothing. Go to prison and pay for your crimes. Leave now. You have no right to be at Aaron's funeral. With those harsh words, Brian and Tracy, shrunken in fear, left the control room. Surely, with so many witnesses to their guilt, they wouldn't think of escaping. After I drove them out of the chapel, I slumped down, drained of all strength. I am deeply sorry that my daughter has caused such a tragedy for Aaron. Tracy's parents approached where I sat and apologized deeply. It must be incredibly painful for them too. They could never have imagined their daughter would conspire with her father-in-law to commit such an act. Please, lift your heads. Your husband is also at fault. The two who must pay for their crimes are those two. You, her parents, are not to blame. As I said this, Tracy's parents finally looked up, tears in their eyes. During Aaron's funeral, no one had cried aloud. Everyone was just bearing a heavy burden inside. I only hope that Brian and Tracy will truly pay for their crimes. Later, as planned, Brian and Tracy went to the police to turn themselves in. Their sentence is not yet decided, but given that they took a life, it will be severe. They won't avoid imprisonment. I may not see their faces for a while. Even if they are released from prison, I don't think they will be together anymore. At Aaron's funeral, I saw with my own eyes how they betrayed each other, each trying to pin the blame on the other. Probably, their love has cooled because of this incident. It's ironic. They committed a crime in the name of love, yet in the end, they will not be united. I feel even more sorry for Aaron. His life was manipulated and lost, and it was all for nothing. My thoughts were heavy with Aaron. I plan to divorce Brian. I cannot remain married to a man who has taken our son's life. From now on, I vow to live thinking only of Aaron. Tracy, too, seems to have been thrown out by her parents and will have no home to return to after her release. Tracy, who had been a housewife since marrying Aaron, will now have to fend for herself. It's uncertain how well she can manage alone, but she deserves to face hardships. No matter how much she atones, Aaron will not return. Compared to the pain that Aaron and I endured, living alone is nothing. I can only hope that Aaron can find some happiness in heaven now. That is all I wish for.